Upon starting Bloodborne, it's easy to come to the false conclusion that this is simply a world full of beasts and you are the exterminator as you are a hunter, but that's not necessarily the case. The story of Bloodborne revolves around the Great Ones, and it's not very obvious at first. The Great Ones were a race of mythical celestial beings that transcend space, time, as well as this dimension. As you are playing Bloodborne, one should assume that the Great Ones are responsible for the state of the world, and they are even orchestrating the player's actions to a certain degree. You are the player character, and you wake up in the city of Yharnam. Yharnam was a town renowned for its medical community, but now the town has seemingly succumbed to a plague, the Plague of Beast. As a hunter, it is your job to join the hunt and exterminate as many beasts as you can until you get close enough to the truth and you find out what's really going on. But for now, you are a hunter, so your job is to hunt. After creating your hunter in Bloodborne, you'll awaken on a stretcher in a clinic with an old man looking over you, preparing what I would assume is some type of blood transfusion. He informs you that whatever happens, don't worry because it's all just a dream. As you awaken, you take note of your surroundings and you appear to be in some sort of a clinic. The clinic you find yourself in is Yosefka's clinic. As you make your way through the clinic, you'll encounter your first beast. Now, as a new player, you'll be unarmed, so even though the beast is at half health, it will likely kill you and you will awaken in the hunter's dream. As you enter the hunter's dream, the whole area is very reminiscent of a graveyard. As you make your way through the hunter's dream, you'll notice a couple skeleton guys offering you weapons. As you make your way further inside, you'll be introduced to Gurman. Gurman welcomes you to the hunt, and he informs you not to worry too much about all of this, just go out and kill a few beasts. Gurman also informs you that the doll outside is his, and it can be used as you see fit. Unfortunately, the doll is inanimate for now, so our only course of action is to take our weapons and make our way back to Yharnam so we can continue on our adventure. As you're making your way through Yharnam, you'll eventually encounter Eileen the Crow, but don't attack her. It's easy to go around attacking anything that looks like an enemy, but remember, this is a Souls game, so don't attack anything that doesn't attack you first. Eileen the Crow will eventually give you a bold hunter's mark, and she has a very intimate quest line, but after interacting with her, just proceed on your way for now. After you make your way through this initial section of Yharnam, you'll eventually encounter your first boss, which will be the Cleric Beast. Now, upon entering any boss arena, you'll gain a little bit of insight. Insight is defined as inhuman knowledge and represents the player's progress in attempting to understand the Great Ones. Now, you don't want to spend your insight all willy-nilly because it is greatly more valuable later on, as well as Madman's knowledge, which is another source of insight that you can find around the world. Upon entering any boss arena, you will gain a little bit of insight, and upon defeating that boss, you will also gain a little more insight. As far as what we know about the Cleric Beast, well, the Cleric Beast owes its name to the rumor that it was originally a member of the Yharnam clergy that was transformed by the Old Blood. After defeating the Cleric Beast, one obtains the Sword Hunter badge, and the flavor text on the Sword Hunter badge states, "One of the badges crafted by the Healing Church. The silver sword is a symbol of a church hunter. Ludwig was one of the many Healing Church hunters to come, many of whom were clerics. As it was, clerics transformed into the most hideous beast." This flavor text suggests that the Cleric Beast was likely a member of the Healing Church and possibly a hunter that was employed under Ludwig that succumbed to the Scourge of Beasts, leading to their descent into beasthood. Now, the Cleric Beast can be a pretty difficult fight, especially because this is your first real beast boss fight and you haven't leveled up your weapons at this point. But a little space and patience can get the job done quite easily. And after defeating the Cleric Beast, you will obtain even more insight and you will unlock a hunter's lamp that will take you back to the hunter's dream. After you finish with the Cleric Beast and you make your way back to the hunter's dream, you can visit the doll that was inanimate, and using some of the insight you gained, you can now breathe life into the doll. The doll is basically your firekeeper or your maiden for the game. The doll is essentially your conduit used to level up, and you can channel your blood echoes through her, which are essentially souls in this game. After leveling up, you can continue to descend through Yharnam, and before you face your next boss, you should go around the town because there are windows with red lamps by them. If a window has a red lamp by them, it's likely you can talk to the person inside that residence, and there are a couple of little side quests around Yharnam. One of the side quests involves you helping out a little girl because her parents are seemingly lost, but unfortunately, one of her parents has succumbed to the plague of beast, and I believe her mother is dead. One of the items this little girl will give you is a music box, and the music box is useful up until the end of the game, so to speak. But unfortunately, wherever you send this little girl, she'll end up dying. So no matter what, her story ends up being tragic. As you continue to descend through Yharnam, you'll eventually reach a graveyard where you'll encounter your next boss, which is Father Gascoigne. Now, as far as what we know about Father Gascoigne, well, Gascoigne was a priest in a foreign land where he eventually earned the title of Father. At some point in his life, Gascoigne would travel to Yharnam and he eventually joined the Healing Church as a hunter. From here, Gascoigne would go on to partner with Henrique, an older hunter, and the two of them made a very effective duo, and their partnership led to Henrique's tragically long life. At some point, Father Gascoigne took a wife by the name of Viola, and the two had a pair of children. As Gascoigne continued to hunt, he eventually became affected by the bloodlust, forgetting even his family. Viola was known to play a tiny music box, a memento of theirs, in order to draw him home when he had been out hunting all night, helping him remember her and their children when he began succumbing to the bloodlust. One of Gascoigne's daughters still resides in central Yharnam, and by the time we find her, she gives us the music box and sends us on a mission in order to bring her parents home. Unfortunately, we're unable to achieve that goal, and we end up with two options: to send her to Yosefka's clinic where she'll eventually become a celestial minion, or to send her to the Chapel of Odeon where she'll be killed by a man-eating boar on the way there. The tiny music box she gives us can be used during the fight with Father Gascoigne to stun him during the battle. During his final hunt, Gascoigne finally succumbed to the bloodlust, becoming little more than one of the beasts he had hunted. Viola left home in order to search for her husband, but she forgot her music box, and her body turns up near the tomb of Odeon, near where Father Gascoigne is found hacking away at corpses, until you, as the hunter, finally put him down. After defeating Father Gascoigne, you will likely make your way to Cathedral Ward. This will serve as your central hub for most of the game. And there is a lady here that appears to be some kind of a demon lady, but she informs you that the Cathedral Ward is a safe haven for anyone you send here, as the incense she burns keeps the demons away. Look at the Cathedral Ward as your safe area for the few inhabitants that remain around Yharnam that are willing to go here. But you have to be careful because depending on who you send here, whoever you send can eventually start killing some of the civilized inhabitants of Cathedral Ward, some of which are integral to the story. So you have to be careful who you send here, or you have to be careful not to make certain female NPCs jealous of one another. As you make your way through the next area, you'll eventually encounter an NPC named Alfred. Alfred is the protege of Master Ligorius, and he introduces himself as Hunter of the Vile Bloods. Now you can start a pack with this guy, although you may eventually become a Vile Blood yourself. For now, go ahead and start a pack with Alfred, and he can actually help you out in one of the upcoming boss fights. Now as you continue, you'll eventually make your way to Old Yharnam. This place is infested with beasts, but you can actually zoom through the area pretty quickly, assuming you know where to go already. Once you enter the outer arena of the boss area, you'll notice a summon sign where you can summon an NPC to help you out with the boss. This summon sign will be Alfred, the NPC we just made a pact with. As far as the boss of this area goes, you'll be facing the Bloodstarved Beast. Now the Bloodstarved Beast can be a pretty difficult fight, especially considering you're still close to the beginning of the game, so your weapons aren't too leveled. On top of that, for the Bloodstarved Beast second phase, it starts doing a bunch of poison damage. So before the Bloodstarved Beast kills you, you'll likely die from the poison buildup. But as you've been making your way through this area, you've been finding a bunch of antidotes. Those will help you negate some of the poison buildup in the fight. But another thing you've been finding are these pungent blood cocktails. These pungent blood cocktails can actually be used in the boss fight against the Bloodstarved Beast. As the name suggests, the beast is blood-starved. So if you throw one of these pungent blood cocktails at a wall, it will give you a small opening to deal some damage to the blood-starved beast while its back is turned. And if you're really good and you're really quick, you can turn this opportunity window into a small visceral attack. It helps a lot when fighting the blood-starved beast, especially if you're descending through the Chalice dungeon. Now, as far as what we know about the Bloodstarved Beast, it is suggested that the Bloodstarved Beast was once a person receiving blood healing as part of a ritual performed by the Healing Church's members in Old Yharnam in order to learn more about the Great Ones and the effects of blood healing. A corpse of another Bloodstarved Beast can be found crucified and chained in a small chapel in Old Yharnam. Moreover, below that corpse, the player finds ritual blood. This suggests that the Bloodstarved Beast has some connection to the ritualistic practices performed by the Healing Church and has some significance to blood healing and its administration. In this case, it is possible that these beasts must be skinned alive in order to collect their blood without killing them, since they would simply regenerate minor cuts and surgical shunts. It is not unlikely that these beasts were once blood saints, the Healing Church's own nuns chosen as a source of blood healing. This would explain both why these beings are skinned alive, being blood-starved, and it would explain the similarities between these and female beast patients. After defeating the Bloodstarved Beast, you will likely return to Cathedral Ward. Now, Cathedral Ward actually connects to several different places, but if you take the lift in Cathedral Ward, it will bring you to the Upper Cathedral. And at the top of the upper cathedral, it leads to an in-game area, so we're not going to worry about that for now. But if you descend through the cathedral and you descend through a series of sketchy jumps, you'll eventually encounter the abandoned workshop. Now, if you look around the abandoned workshop, it's obvious that the hunter's dream was modeled after this place, or this place is basically the hunter's dream within a dream. Anyway, if you make your way inside the building, you'll encounter an inanimate doll. But if you look to the table to the right of the doll, you'll see an item on the table. That item is going to be 1/3 of the umbilical cord. Now, you're probably wondering, what is the umbilical cord? Well, the umbilical cord is a great relic, also known as the cord of the eye. Every infant great one has the precursor to the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord is easy to overlook. You might see it in your inventory and you might think, what the hell does that do? But the umbilical cord is actually very important, and it's basically the key to getting what many players consider to be the definitive ending of the game. Basically, you need 3 pieces of the umbilical cord, and right before your final encounter, that's when you should eat the 3 pieces of the umbilical cord in order to get the definitive ending. And it's funny that people consider that to be the definitive ending because it's very Lovecraft, but we're not going to worry about that for now. As you continue to descend through this area, you'll eventually come across a beast guarding a door. Upon killing that beast, you'll obtain some madman's knowledge, and upon entering that door, you'll be in a different section of Yharnam altogether. Now, you have to be careful because at this point there's these bagmen running around, and if these bagmen kill you, they'll imprison you and you'll wind up in a totally different section of the game, so you have to be careful. Also, as you proceed, you'll start encountering other hunters that want to kill you. Now, if you are a member of the Vile Bloods, upon killing one of these hunters, you'll receive a blood drake. You can offer these blood drakes to the Vile Blood Queen for standing. One thing you'll notice if you go back to the hunter's dream is if you try to reawaken at the Tomb of Odeon, it won't let you because there is a fight actively happening in that area. So what we have to do is we have to warp to the Cathedral Ward and we have to make our way backwards to assist in the fight. Also, it is probably at this point you'll start hearing a baby crying in the background everywhere you go. The baby crying is very symbolic. It's very reminiscent of somebody telling you to wake up and go feed the baby. So if we backtrack from the Cathedral Ward back to the area where we fought Father Gascon, you'll notice as we enter the area, there is a hunter here that will try to engage you. Now, as you're fighting this hunter, Eileen the Crow will come to assist you, and this is all part of her quest line. Now, you have to be really careful right here because Eileen can get killed pretty easily, but if you hit her too many times, she'll immediately become hostile to you after you take out the crazed hunter. Upon killing the hunter, Eileen will speak to you and she'll let you know that that wasn't necessary because as she sees it, she is the hunter of hunters. But she states you're good, extremely good, and she gives you props for taking out Gascon, seeing as Gascon was succumbing to the bloodlust. After you finish talking to her, she'll give you a gesture and you can be on your way. After helping out Eileen the Crow, I make my way to Hemwick Charnel Lane, and this area kind of sucks to be honest because when you initially get here, there's just a bunch of dudes with rifles and a bunch of dogs trying to kill you. And if you ever encounter dogs in a Souls game, you know what a pain in the ass they can be to deal with. But eventually, as you make your way through this area, you'll encounter the Witch of Hemwick. Now, as far as we know about the Witch of Hemwick, well, we know this whole town is essentially a crematorium and a cemetery for the victims of the School of Menesis. The witches are elderly hags who make a living by gouging out the eyes of folks in the Hewick district of Yarnum. They use these eyes collected to conduct rituals granting them arcane magic. During the night, they use this magic to summon paranormal monsters called Mad Ones to gather the eyes of the dead and the living for the witches to obtain. Upon entering the room where the witches reside, only the first witch's health bar is shown at first. She can summon Mad Ones into the room to pursue the player, and they're able to summon up to 3, but only after the witch's health bar is depleted. The witch herself is invisible, but she reveals herself to the player once the player gets in melee distance. Once exposed, she will either attack you with magic or teleport to another part of the room entirely. Once the first witch's health bar is depleted, the second witch will appear. Now, once the second witch shows up, she'll summon more Mad Ones to pursue the player, and not just that, the second witch is able to revive the first witch to half her health bar. The witches are even more aggressive during the second phase, as they can shoot magic missiles that temporarily immobilize the hunters, allowing the Mad Ones to catch up and attack them, or if you're close enough to the witches can grab the hunter and attempt to gouge out their eyes, dealing massive damage. The trick to defeating the witches is you gotta basically deplete both of their health bars at the same time. Upon depleting both of their health bars at the same time, the Mad Ones will disappear. Now, upon defeating the witches, if you make your way downstairs, you'll encounter a hunter that appears to be tied up and deceased. In his possession will be some kin cold blood, so go ahead and collect that and make your way back to the hunter's dream. After leveling up with the doll at the hunter's dream, you'll likely make your way back to the cathedral ward, and at this point, your next destination is likely going to be Grand Cathedral. Now, once you reach Grand Cathedral, you'll encounter Vicar Amelia. Now, as far as what we know about Vicar Amelia, well, we know Amelia was a high-ranking member of the Healing Church and the successor of Lawrence, and the one to he entrusted his gold pendant to, as she is holding it as you enter the arena. When we first encounter Amelia, she is seen as a normal human woman with tattered white robes, kneeling and reciting a prayer. But after a few instances, she begins to change abruptly. Her skin ruptures with the force of her new body, splattering blood all around her. Now a new kind of Cleric Beast. Her ash blonde hair has become a long wild mane, and her face is covered with scraps of her own clothes like the rest of her body. Her head has turned into a lupine head with thin antlers and a slasher smile full of sharp teeth. She can extend her claws like a cat, and they are sharp enough and hard enough to emit sparks when grinding on the floor full of stone. Her arms are powerful as well, being able to create very powerful shockwaves when she smashes them on the floor. The same gold pendant she was clutching proves to be more than a simple locket, as Amelia is able to channel energy through it in order to heal her wounds in a pillar full of golden light, thus making it function similarly as a hunter's tool. As a true beast, Amelia will take extra damage from fire incineration, but upon defeating Amelia, you'll be free to interact with the skull that's on the altar. Now, upon touching the skull, you'll receive a vision of Master Wilhelm, and he appears to be talking to someone who I would assume to be Master Lawrence. Now, whoever Wilhelm is talking to, he appears to be leaving, and while Wilhelm assumes betrayal, Wilhelm also informs him that we are born by the blood. We are made men by the blood. We are undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood. So at this point, we're free to proceed on our way. And if you die to one of the bagmen at this point, you'll basically wind up in a hypogeum goal, which is essentially a prison. But assuming you know your way through this area, you can actually blaze through it really fast. Now, at some point, you may encounter an NPC in this area, and she's sitting in the corner crying, and she's dressed as if she's part of the church. Now, she won't talk to you if you're dressed as a hunter, but if you have a different garb on, as a church garb or a garb from the healing church, she will actually communicate with you, and she'll give you some madman's knowledge, and you can send her to the cathedral ward. In this case, I am dressed as a member of the healing church. Now, once again, assuming you know your way through this area, you can actually blitz to the boss really fast. Now, right outside the boss arena is another summon that can help you out during the fight. And you may not need this on regular mode, but if you're playing on New Game Plus, this next boss can be kind of a bitch. As you make your way into the boss arena, you will be confronted by the Dark Beast, Parl. As far as what we know about the Dark Beast, well, we know the Dark Beasts are differentiated from other beasts by their ability to generate electricity or bolt damage from their hides, and by being in nature undead. Parl is discovered lying as if he were dead in the graveyard of the Dark Beast, located at the entrance to Yargul from Old Yarnum. Parl will drop the Spark Hunter's badge upon defeat. The Spark Hunter's badges were crafted by Archibald, the infamous eccentric of the healing church, for all of his friends, implying some kind of connection with Parl. The gate between Yargul and Old Yarnum can only be opened from this side, implying that it was therefore closed from that side. The area that Parl can be found in can only be reached through the cells of Yargul. There is a tunnel there that appears to have been artificially created, found in the back of the complex leading out to the graveyard. The existence of this tunnel is extremely suspicious, and it doesn't mess with the rest of the building. If it was meant to be part of the building, it is likely that it would have been a more constructed design, but since it does not seem to be a more constructed design, the likely assumption is that the tunnel was created forcefully, perhaps by the frantic and enraged claws of Parl the Dark Beast as he tried to escape from his imprisonment. All evidence adds up to this possible narrative. Archibald was obsessed with artificially creating the blue sparks of the Dark Beast, and he likely needed a Dark Beast in order to study to create the sparks. So, voluntarily or not, Parl likely became his test subject. The experimentation of Archibald eventually transformed Parl into a Dark Beast, who subsequently broke out of his confines and clawed his way into the entrance of Yargul, perhaps hoping to escape. It is likely that the gate was already locked, and that after this effort Parl died, but due to the nature of the Dark Beast, Parl continued to live on, although only skin and bones in his flesh had rotted away. Upon killing the Dark Beast, you will be able to open the door he is guarding. Now, as you make your way back to the cathedral ward, there's actually an NPC nearby that you can encounter in a dark alley. If you approach her residence and talk to her, she will inform you that she is a prostitute, but even though she's a prostitute, she's still integral to the story, right? And so if you send her to Cathedral Ward, you can interact with her once you get back to the ward, and she'll actually offer you some of her blood, assuming you have no problem with taking a prostitute's blood. But even then, you have to be careful, because certain female NPCs might get jealous if they see you taking a prostitute's blood too many times. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna head towards the Forbidding Woods, and we're gonna pass by the area where we met Alfred, and upon getting to this door, the door will be closed and there will be a guy on the other end of the door asking for a password. If you give him the password, Fear the Old Blood, he will open the door, revealing that the guy has been dead all along, but he will give you some madman's knowledge. Now, This is the Forbidden Woods, and this area is absolutely awful. There are a slew of these snakehead guys running around that can deal massive damage, as well as just a pile of these walking snakes roaming the area. But once you get to the boss of this area, you'll face down the Shadows of Yharnam, which is actually a trio boss fight. You thought the duo boss fights were bad? Well, the Shadows of Yharnam are like hold my beer. Now I'm just playing. These guys aren't actually too bad on normal mode, but on New Game Plus, these guys will run you out the building. As far as what we know about the Shadows of Yharnam, well, we know the Shadows of Yharnam are humanoid figures cloaked in black robes. There are 3 different types that each wield different weaponry and have their own attack pattern. The first wields a long thin sword similar to the Shikage, and the second wields the same kind of sword but also wields a candle in its offhand, while the third wields a mace and can manipulate fire in its offhand. The shadows are encountered in separate locations but never far from Yharnam, the Pthumerian Queen of Blood. The first shadow hunters will likely be encountered in the Forbidden Woods close to the Moonside Lake where Yharnam is first seen. Later, they will appear again in the Nightmare Menesis beneath the moonlit landing at the heights of Mirgo's loft where Yharnam stands weeping looking at the sky. Finally, they can be encountered in the Chalice dungeons, and we know Yharnam is found at the deepest levels of the Chalice dungeons. The shadows in the Forbidden Woods will drop the Blood Rapture rune, which states, "This rune resonates with the servants of the Queen, carrier of the child blood, who yearns for their queen's blood with little hope of requitement. For them, they find solace in Blood Rapture that serves as a surrogate for their desire." The Blood Rapture rune description indicates that the shadows are servants of Yharnam, the Pthumerian Queen, who carried a child of blood long ago. The shadows share several traits with other Pthumerians, such as they are taller than humans and possess that statuesque quality seen in other enemies like the kidnapping Bagmen, or the church servants, or the church giants. They are also weaker to arcane damage than other types, a trait they share with other Pthumerian enemies. Finally, they can manipulate fire, controlling it with their hands or their breath in the case of the shadows that wield the candles. The Pthumerians were capable of controlling fire in blood, bending it to their will and using it as they see fit. Upon defeating the Shadows of Yharnam, you will unlock the path to Byrgenwerth. Now, we don't want to go to Byrgenwerth yet because in Byrgenwerth, we'll fight Rom the Vacuous Spider, and upon defeating Rom, the world state will change. And before we do that, we want to knock out a few other things. So next, we're going to head to the Nightmare Frontier. And to do this, we have to head back to Cathedral Ward, and a short ways up from where we fought Amelia is actually another Amigdala. Now, if you acquired a special stone from an NPC in the last area we just came through, this Amigdala will pick you up, and once it picks you up, it will actually send you to the lecture building. Now, the lecture building is actually a great farming location, as you can group up a bunch of these scholar zombies and kill them for a massive amount of blood echoes. This is like one of the first great farming locations you unlock. But if you make your way through the door of the lecture building, it will take you to the Nightmare Frontier. Now, the Nightmare Frontier can be kind of rough in online mode because you're basically primed for PvP as soon as you enter this area. Like, I've never been invaded more in Bloodborne than I have in the Nightmare Frontier, but if you don't want to get invaded, you can simply just save and quit and switch to offline mode. But there's also some NPC hunters in this area that you can kill for some fairly easy blood drakes. As you're making your way through the Nightmare Frontier, at a certain point you'll come to a ledge where you're inspecting this piece of loot. As you're inspecting this piece of loot, Patches will come from behind you and he'll actually kick you down into the poisonous swamp, and he'll be laughing the entire time as he does it. For now, there's nothing you can really do about it but make your way to the Amigdala, who's going to be the boss of this area. After you defeat the Amigdala, then you can confront Patches. Now, as far as what we know about the Amigdala, well, we know the Amigdalas are great ones in Bloodborne. One appears as a boss in the Amigdala chambers in the Nightmare Frontier. Meanwhile, others populate various locations around the world as non-playable characters. Sometimes Amigdalas serve as methods of transportation between other areas, while other Amigdalas appear in Chalice dungeons as bosses, as they appear in the Cursed Sumerian Defilement, the Lower Loran, and the Its Gravestone Chalice. Amigdalas are monstrous entities with spider-like bodies, a short tail, and a head, which are very similar to the part of the brain called the amygdala, or the amygdaloid body. They have many bulbous eyes that bulge when they use their arcane attacks. They have 6 fingers on their 7 arms and reptilian talons on their 2 legs. Many of them also sport tendrils on their faces. Now, as far as amygdalas go, it is said that great ones are sympathetic in nature, so it is believed that it wants to watch over humanity and help humanity's inability to comprehend them, complicating such an ideal. It is worshipped as a deity in the School of Menesis, having various statues found all across its architecture. It also seems to desire human sacrifices, as one of its followers, Patches, sends regular humans to be offered as a tribute on a regular basis. After defeating the Amygdala, you can make your way back to the Hunter's Dream and level up with the doll. And after leveling up, you're pretty much clear to head to Byrgenwerth. Now, upon entering Byrgenwerth, you'll encounter a few beasts that aren't beasts in the traditional sense of the word. These beasts are more like celestial beings. There's also another hunter you'll encounter in here, but you have to be careful because she can put you down extremely quickly, as she can use a call beyond and she can essentially one-tap you with a star blast. But upon beating her, if you go upstairs, you'll encounter Master Wilhelm. Now, Master Wilhelm will actually point you in the direction of the moon, and this essentially leads into the lake. But before you descend into the lake, if you look around, you can find a few more clues. One of which says, when the red moon hangs low, the line between man and beast is blurred, and the great ones descend. A womb will be blessed with a child. If you keep looking around the area, you'll find another clue that says, a spider hides all manner of rituals, certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared. If you make your way back over to the lake where Wilhelm pointed and you jump into the lake, you will eventually descend down to Moonside Lake. This is where you'll encounter Rom, the vacuous spider. Now, Rom is not actually hostile to us. You can actually walk directly up to Rom and have a nice friendly conversation, and Rom will actually never attack you until you attack her first. As far as what we know about Rom, well, Rom the vacuous spider is akin or a brethren to the great ones of the cosmos. Rom's large gray rock-hard head is pockmarked with dull, seemingly sightless eyes that stare in all directions, as well as a small, round mouth filled with sharp teeth. Rom's body is overgrown with fluorescent flowers, in addition to dark eye-like shapes. Evidence indicates that Rom was the result of an experiment conducted at Bergenworth. Rom the vacuous spider controls the barrier that prevents normal humans from seeing the true horrors all around them, such as lesser Amigdala crawling on the walls of the cathedral ward. Rom was once a scholar of Bergenworth who at some point went through a metamorphosis into kin, courtesy of Kos, according to dialogue given by Mikolash. As you're fighting Mikolash will state, "The Bergenworth spider hides all manner of rituals and keeps our masters lost from us. A terrible shame. It makes my head shudder uncontrollably." He will also state, Kos, or Kosum, some say. "Do you hear our prayers, as you did the vacuous spider? Grant us eyes, grant us eyes." Mikolash, the host of the nightmare. And don't forget, if you remember the clue we found earlier, in the library reads, "The spider hides all manner of rituals, certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared." Upon defeating Rom the vacuous spider, the world state will change, and you will notice there appears to be a tall lady in bridal attire standing a short distance away from you. As you approach her though, you won't be able to get too close because the pale blood moon will rise and you'll pass out, and you'll awaken back at either the cathedral ward or the hunter's dream with a message that says, "Ritual secrets broken. Seek the nightmare newborn." So now that Rom has been defeated, there's a couple things that we can do. So first of all, if you didn't have enough insight to see the Amigdala all around you, now all secrets should be revealed. Next, now that the world state has changed, we can actually go finish off Eileen the Crow's quest line. Now, if you try to warp to Grand Cathedral, you'll notice we can't because there's a fight actively taking place there. By the time we get there though, we see Eileen the Crow outside looking like she's on her last legs about to succumb to her wounds. She explains that she's made a bit of a blunder and she's going to take a short rest, but she tells you not to worry as she's taken enough blood to save an old woman's life. Based off her words, you think she's seemingly going to live, and she advises you that this is her score to settle, and from there, you'll get the wait emote. If you decide to proceed inside the cathedral, you'll be facing the Bloody Crow of Canehurst. Now, back in the day, a lot of people considered the Bloody Crow of Canehurst to be one of the harder bosses in the game. Now, as far as what we know about the Bloody Crow of Canehurst, well, the Bloody Crow is one of the royal guards who protects Elise, Queen of the Vile Bloods at Canehurst Castle. The Crow is a hunter who has presumably gone mad with bloodlust, and as a result, he has become a target of Eileen the Crow. However, in her old age, she proved to be no match in combat for him, and as the player finds her, she appears to be in a pool of her own blood, barely alive on the steps leading up to Grand Cathedral. The Crow wields the foreign Shikage weapon which eats away at his very essence. He also wears the Canehurst set, but with the crow feather garb instead on his torso. Hunters dressed as crows to suggest sky burial. After defeating the Bloody Crow of Canehurst, you can make your way back outside and you can interact with Eileen, and she'll say something to the effect of, "Don't youngsters listen to their elders nowadays?" And unfortunately, Eileen is going to take the extra long nap at this point. And if you save the game and you reload, she'll be gone and there'll just be a pool of her own blood here. After taking out the Bloody Crow of Canehurst, you will likely make your way through Yargul's unseen village, and you will likely head towards Advent Plaza. At this point, you will be facing the One Reborn. Now, the One Reborn has one of the coolest intro cinematics in the game, but unfortunately, as far as a boss goes, the One Reborn is actually kind of a pushover. Where your problems are going to lie when fighting this guy is, up top, this guy has a bunch of bell maidens and they're constantly throwing fire down at you. And if you keep getting hit by the fire, it could make this fight kind of tedious. But there are pillars that lead up top to where the bell maidens are, so you could just head directly for the bell maidens and kill them off, or you could just go for the boss kill like I did. Now, as far as what we know about the One Reborn, well, the One Reborn is a colossal undead mass. He is reborn as part of the Menesis ritual. The School of Menesis controls the unseen village. The school has its roots at Bergenworth, a bygone institution of learning, and as its name suggests, the members are mostly scholars that dedicate themselves to understanding the secrets in the natures of the Great Ones and how to use them as an advantage towards humanity. And if you don't remember, Bergenworth is actually the place where we were before we fought Rom. The Healing Church mostly focuses on old blood and blood transfusion, which later proved disastrous. The church deployed hunters to dispose of beasts, but the hunters later became blood drunk and transformed into even more inhuman beasts. This unending cycle ultimately resulted in the destruction of Yharnam and the church and all its resources spent on the combat of beasts, and thus they could not have gone any further with their research. The choir had further success. They discovered the importance of lumen flowers in the process of creating kin, and thus they successfully created a celestial emissary to communicate with Abitus, daughter of the cosmos. They mostly focused on the cosmos in further ascension. They would later go on to form the orphanage to use children for their research. The School of Menesis, however, after the discovery of the land of Lauren, started to deploy hunters in order to kidnap people for their research. They also controlled Hewick Charnel Lane to harvest organs from the dead in order to perform blasphemous rituals. The school also had several contacts with the Amigdala, and they worshipped them. Many Amigdala statues can be found in Yargul's unseen village. These three affiliations would later become rivals, and one conflict after another would spark. The choir would send agents to spy on the School of Menesis, and the School of Menesis responded by kidnapping members of the choir as well as the Healing Church. Now, once you have beaten the One Reborn, there's actually a few things you can do. You can either proceed with the main story, or you can go for some of the optional bosses in the game. And I don't know if you remember, but when we were at Cathedral Ward, I said in the upper cathedral, there's actually an optional boss and an in-game area. So if you proceed through that area, one of the bosses you'll encounter is the Celestial Emissary. Now, as far as what we know about the Celestial Emissary, well, the Celestial Emissary resides in a field of lumen flowers in Upper Cathedral Ward. The Celestial Emissary is possibly the Healing Church's most successful experiment in a long line of failures. In the early days of the Healing Church, The Great Ones were linked to the ocean. In an attempt to contact the Great Ones, patients would imbibe a great quantity of water. Without even a lofty goal of communicating with the Great Ones, patients would simply listen with their heads bound and their eyes covered, listen to the howl of the sea and the unfathomable, unspeakable utterings of the Great Ones. The fluids they ingested would writhe around inside their head, the initial makings of internal eyes. These patients would imbibe so much water that it would cause their head to expand. The process was seemingly agonizing. Patients would be found in the research hall and they would beg to be put out of their misery, believing that they must have done something horribly wrong to be subjected to such a fate. Most of these experiments would end in death. The corpses would then be cast into an acidic pool at the foot of the stairs to be dissolved, and the whole process would begin again with fresh patients. Now, most patients would not survive with sanity. They were driven mad with the feeling of drowning and becoming convinced that they had failed. They would plead for forgiveness and help of Maria, an old hunter that lived in the clock tower nearby, and she was in charge of patient care. She tried to comfort them by allowing them to access the lumen flower garden nearby, and although it worked for some, most could not comprehend why she cared for their well-being after what was going on. Those that imbibed the water were deformed by the process and their bodies acclimated to the situation. Such an increase in size, thinning of the body, and expanding of the head into blank, unseeing masses of flesh. Rarely their heads would develop tentacles, and they appeared to be extremely painful when they emerged, and they could self-induce frenzy in any life form that touched them. Some of them were able to access cosmic powers of kin, but even they went mad and were left in the garden, the calm of which was likely how they remained sane enough to even ascend that far. Eventually, there were those that became so enlightened by what the celestial attendant said that they grew to immense sizes, gained blue flesh with gender-neutral bodies, and could harness raw cosmic fields of power equivalent to the Great Ones. But even those patients, despite the calm of the lumen wood plant they attended, were unable to remain sane, and their heads eventually collapsed in on themselves while their power was unstable. They were left in the garden above the lumen flowers with a large lumen wood plant in the center, and were left as living failures. It can be surmised then that the celestial emissary, whoever it once was, maintained their sanity long enough to comprehend the cosmos and to become a great one of the legitimate sort. Once they figured out how to do it properly, the church was likely to produce kin of the sort that you see in the garden, and to this day they remain in the garden, and this entire area is thought to be an orphanage officially, where new great ones and other kin acted as the church's front of the highest level of contemplation and communication with Abitus. So upon defeating the celestial emissary, if you head through the door that it was guarding, you'll be able to face off against Abitus, daughter of the cosmos. And as far as what we know about Abitus, well, Abitus is a left-behind Great One who inhabits the Altar of Despair at the back of the Grand Cathedral in Yharnam. Abitus is a Great One from the land of Its, a plane located in the deeper reaches of the Chalice Dungeon Labyrinth. According to the choir, the land of Its lies in contact with the cosmos, which allows the Great Ones who resided there to function on a transcendental plane of thought. The augur of Abitus suggests that the church was able to use phantasms, which are slug-like invertebrates known to be augurs of the Great One, to partially summon Abitus. We can see this in game when the player uses the augur of Abitus. A cosmic rift opens and a number of Abitus tentacles forcefully project through, being summoned before being severed off to the ground. The initial encounter with Abitus through her phantasms marked the start of an inquiry into the cosmos from within the old labyrinth. It essentially was a search for the land of Its, which lies in contact with the cosmos. To undertake the task, an elite delegation of the healing church known as the Choir was formed. The Choir was formed out of those high-ranking elite members of the healing church who founded the orphanage, a place where these members could pursue scholarship and experimentation. As the name suggests, the subjects of their experimentation were vulnerable children who no one would miss, who would become potent, unseen thinkers of the healing church. The land of Its is reached through a ritual performed with the great Its chalice. This chalice was brought back to the surface after a time of the Bergenworth schism during an inquiry into the cosmos from within the labyrinth. Its ability to unlock the land of Its allowed the Choir to have an audience with Abitus face to face rather than partially summoning it. Perhaps upon discovering Abitus, the Choir believed that they had finally had the breakthrough they needed, but they had made contact with a seemingly legitimate Great One, and surely more would follow. However, this discovery of Abitus revealed a startling truth to the scholars, that at some point in the history, there had been a mass departure of Great Ones, and that the augur of Abitus' description notes Abitus herself had been abandoned. As it turned out, the Choir and Abitus had goals that aligned, and both were seeking to rediscover the Great Ones. The Choir received an epiphany in that the cosmos is actually very close by, but they knew that Abitus, along with the other Great Ones, had existed in close proximity with the cosmos. In the world of Bloodborne, the cosmos is not actually the chasm of space and stars above the atmosphere, but the plane that permeates the inhabitant space that is very close to the people of Yharnam in the sky that is just above their heads. However, the limited human intellect is unable to function on such a transcendental plane and must receive help from beings of higher planes such as the Great Ones for guidance. In order to elevate their thoughts, just as Provost Wilhelm attempted to do by lining his brains with eyes, the Choir attempted to contact the Great Ones that inhabited the cosmos, a place that was so close but yet so far out of reach. To do this, they tried a great number of experiments. They tried using Abitus phantasms to reach lofty planes of darkness, but they failed to make contact with the outer reaches of the cosmos. Instead, they created a small exploding star. This is clearly a very dangerous means of attempting to contact the Great Ones, and thus it was discontinued. They tried creating sound waves like using bells that were imbued with arcane power. To do this, they likely used phantasms, as phantasms are closely associated with imbuing objects with arcane power, such as the empty phantasm shell, for example. Unfortunately, this was also a failure, and it may also be that the brain suckers are also a product of the Choir's experimentation, as if you look at the head of the brain suckers, the head of the brain sucker appears to have been cut, and a phantasm appears to have been inserted in its place, and these phantasms ravenously seek out insight, sucking the brain of any victim they come in contact with. Perhaps it was after all these failures that the members of the choir realized the potential of their young orphan test subjects. As noted, the orphanage key explains that the children of the orphanage became potent unseen thinkers of the healing church. When the player travels to the orphanage, they find a vast number of celestial emissaries. Celestial meaning positioned in or relating to the sky or outer space as observed in astronomy, and emissary meaning a person sent as a diplomatic representative on a special mission. These creatures were clearly created to make contact with the great ones of the cosmos, acting as emissaries on behalf of mankind. It is unknown how exactly they are created, but it is certain that they are not natural. Completing the Imposter Yosefka quest will reveal to the player that those that the player sent to her clinic became celestial emissaries. Yosefka does give an interesting clue about how celestial emissaries are made. She gives you an interesting bit of dialogue when she says, "I received another patient. This time I'll be trying out old blood. I've achieved much and I owe it all to you. Take this as a thanks." She'll give you 3 blue elixirs and she'll state, "Custom made and cheers to the discovery of kinship. Does it make you feel warm inside?" This dialogue strongly indicates that Yosefka anesthesiated her patients through the use of blue elixir, and that the old blood is what allowed her to create celestial emissaries. The created emissaries are known as kin of the cosmos. Abitus herself is called daughter of the cosmos. The kin cold blood item reads, "Cold blood of inhuman kin of the cosmos, brethren to the great ones." Now, once you defeated Abitus, you can actually head to Yosefka's clinic and get another piece of the umbilical cord if you haven't done it already. So if you head to Yosefka's clinic and you enter the area from the back side, you'll find several celestial emissaries, some of which are people you sent to her. At the very back upstairs, you'll find Yosefka on a stretcher, and she'll state how she's not feeling very well. And unfortunately, if you kill her, you will receive another piece of the umbilical cord. But if before you kill her, you should listen to what she has to say, because she does give you some pretty good dialogue. And unfortunately, this is Yosefka's fate, and it's sad because I think she probably has the best character model in the game. Another optional boss you may choose to take on is Martyr Ligorius. So, if you head to the witch's abode where we fought the 2 witches that were summoning the mad ones, and you make your way backwards, eventually you'll encounter a large pillar. If you walk up to that pillar, a horse-drawn carriage will come. If you get inside that horse-drawn carriage, it will take you to Canehurst Castle. Now, at the top of Canehurst Castle lies Queen Elise, Queen of the Vile Bloods. But before you can even get to Queen Elise, you have to go through Martyr Ligorius. Now, Martyr Ligorius is an optional boss, but this guy is easily one of the hardest bosses in the game, in my opinion. I struggled with this guy on normal mode, and on New Game Plus, I was having such a hard time with him that I actually ended up summoning another player, and even with summons of another player, this dude is so tough, he will absolutely run you out the building. I did eventually manage to beat him solo, but even then, I think I like fluked out, you know? You know how you fight a guy so many times, and then that one time you actually get him, you actually wonder, I wonder if that was all me or if I just fluked out, you know? But anyway, as far as what we know about Martyr Ligorius, Martyr Ligorius was once the head of the Executioners, a fanatical partition of the Healing Church's hunters dedicated to the complete and utter destruction of the Canehurst Vilebloods for their use of the old blood that is, in their eyes, seen as unholy and tainted. At some point, he discovered a vile secret within the castle and took it upon himself to guard it from any that may seek to uncover it. He donned the crown of illusion and sat himself upon his seat to guard the place for all of eternity. He is mentioned in high regard by Alfred, who has the utmost adoration for him. Gurman is later seen referring to Ligorius and using the quote when discussing the morality of a hunter, and I believe that quote to be, "Acts of goodness is not always wise, and acts of evil are not always foolish, but regardless we shall strive to be good." Martyr Ligorius is a standing visual against all those that seek the undying Queen of Canehurst. After long years of guarding access to the Queen's chambers, Ligorius has become a feeble aspect of himself, almost as a walking mummy, and yet still displays beautiful robes that befit his status. He wields a short-bladed scythe and a bladed serpentine dagger and complements both by harnessing arcane energy. Now, upon defeating Martyr Ligorius, you can access the Queen of the Vilebloods. Annalise, Queen of the Vilebloods, also known as the Undead Queen, is the leader and the only remaining member of the Canehurst Vilebloods. The others were either left or have been executed by the Executioners. She can be found at Canehurst Castle and a hidden wing behind Martyr Ligorius' throne, which is revealed by approaching the throne while wearing the Crown of Illusions. You can actually bend the knee to the Queen and you can pledge allegiance to the Vilebloods. And at that point, any hunters you kill will drop blood dregs, and you can bring your blood dregs to her and you can turn them in for standing. Also, there's an invitation on the table over here, and if you take that invitation and you go back to Alfred of the Executioners that we met at the beginning of the game, you can give him this invitation to the castle. And if you give him this invitation, by the time you go back to the castle, you can see that Alfred has killed the Queen and all that remains of her is a bloody mess. But you can actually take the Queen's remains to the altar where we fought Abitus, daughter of the cosmos. And if you take the Queen's remains to that altar, you can actually resurrect the Queen. Now, at this point, all that's left to do is to make our way to the Nightmare Menesis, and as we make our way through the Nightmare Menesis, you will eventually come across Mikolash, the host of the nightmare. Now, Mikolash is kind of a gimmick fight, but he can still be pretty tough, especially if you're on New Game Plus, because if you're on New Game Plus, as you're fighting Mikolash, there's these puppet guys that are in the arena, so you have to make sure those guys aren't hitting you in the back. And the best course of action is to just kill those guys, but those guys will eventually resurrect themselves, so you have to kill Mikolash pretty fast. And while you're fighting Mikolash during his first phase will also spam the Augur of Abitus, and if you get hit with that thing, it can pretty much one-shot you. And then when you get to Mikolash's second phase, Mikolash will use a Call Beyond as well as the Augur of Abitus, and either one of those attacks can one-shot you in New Game Plus. So if you're not careful, This dude will run you out the building. Now, as far as what we know about Mikolash, well, Mikolash, the host of the nightmare, was likely a former student of Bergenworth until he went insane after contacting the Great Ones by using the Menesis cage. He implies that he is aware of the dream world. A popular theory about the nightmare of Menesis, and Mikolash in particular, is that all beings found in the nightmare are people that attempted to make contact with the Great One. The Menesis cage placed on one's head traps the thoughts of the bearer, and upon their death, they are immersed in the dream as themselves are a different freakish incarnation. This might explain Mikolash's death quote, "Now I am waking up, I will forget everything," as his consciousness only exists inside the nightmare, and upon being freed, he will awake to find only his corpse. As you're fighting Mikolash, some of the dialogue you'll get is, "Ah, Kos," or some say Kossum, "Do you hear our prayers? No, we shall not abandon the dream. No one can catch us. No one can stop us now." After phase 1 of the skirmish, he'll say, "Oh, majestic. A hunter is a hunter, even in a dream." But alas, not too fast. The nightmare swirls and churn unending. And sporadically he'll say, "As you once did for the vacuous spider, grant us eyes, grant us eyes. Plant eyes on our brains and cleanse our beastly idiocy. A grand lake of mud, hidden now from sight, the cosmos of course. Let us sit about and speak feverishly, chatting into the wee hours of new ideas of a higher plane." And upon killing Mikolash, he'll say, "I'm waking up now. I'll forget everything." Mikolash definitely has some of the best dialogue of any boss in Bloodborne, but upon killing Mikolash, you're free to descend through Mirgo's loft. And once you get close enough to the next boss arena, you'll eventually encounter the Pthumerian Queen again. And as far as what we know about the Pthumerian Queen, Yharnam was queen of the Pthumerians, who were a race of superhuman beings said to have unlocked the wisdom of the Eldritch Truth. The Pthumerians were originally servants of the Great One, humble guardians who watched over their slumber within the Tomb of Gods, which were old underground labyrinths or chalice dungeons that were carved out below the city of Yharnam. The Yharnam stone confirms that the consciousness persists beyond physical death, so while the Great Ones were referred to as slumbering, it is likely that their physical bodies are dead, which would explain why the labyrinth is known as the Tomb of Gods. As time wore on, Pthumerian society would develop and their descendants would name themselves the monarchical leaders. There was a Pthumerian monarch named Thumeru Ahili, which was also the name of the capital city. Perhaps the Healing Church's founders of Yharnam that were familiar with the tombs thought it would be fitting to name their own city after the Pthumerian Queen, which would become the city of Yharnam. Yharnam is encountered on 3 separate occasions in Bloodborne. She is encountered first in the Moonside Lake, where she is seen standing before the descending weeping blood moon. And she is seen second atop the Cradle Cathedral in Mirgo's loft in the Nightmare Menesis, where she is seen looking towards the source of the Nightmare Newborn's cries. And the final is a location deep within the Chalice Dungeons in the Pthumerian capital city. Her significance to the events that unfold within the story cannot be understated, and the clues to her involvement perhaps start with her appearance. Like other Pthumerians, Yharnam is much taller than regular humans. Her skin is pale and blue, and every time you see her, she is seen wearing a wedding dress with a blood stain on the front of it. And One small detail that a lot of players may overlook is her hands are bound together, and her hands are often seen in a prayer gesture. After you finish interacting with the queen, if you head into the boss arena and you walk towards the baby's cradle, you will be ambushed by Mirgo's wet nurse. Now, as far as what we know about Mirgo's wet nurse, well, Mirgo's wet nurse bears a resemblance to the Amigdala with its 4 pairs of long-limbed arms, although its head is shaped entirely different. The nightmare is slain is actually Mirgo, or the nightmarish link to Mirgo, for whom the wet nurse is its only guardian. The long pause between defeating the boss and the confirmation that the nightmare is in fact slain happens after the baby's cries have faded away and gone silent. Mirgo is the first person form of the Latin verb mirge, which means anything from submerge to overwhelm to drown to conceal. One may assume that Mirgo submerges the player and various NPCs in the nightmare. Mirgo continues to cry during the fight, and there is a strange patch of light just past the crib. As far as the wet nurse goes, she is the only great one to use weapons such as blades, and her blades greatly resemble the burial blades. And according to the burial blades description, the Siderite blades fell from the heavens. It may have been dropped, or it may have been given by the wet nurse. The wet nurse does not bleed. Instead, hitting her produces puffs of dust and black smoke, as well as a strange sound. The same thing happens when hitting ghost-like enemies like the Silver Ladies, the evil labyrinth spirit, or the mad ones. This would suggest that the wet nurse is a disembodied spirit. And another small detail is her amulet with 4 gems actually matches the rune Communion. After defeating the wet nurse, you will likely receive another piece of the umbilical cord. This is very important, as to get the definitive ending of the game, you will need to eat all 3 pieces of the umbilical before facing down the final boss. Also, after defeating the wet nurse, if you play the music box you got in the beginning of the game from Gascoigne's daughter, the crying will finally cease and you will hear a little bit of child laughter. As you return to the hunter's dream, the first thing you will notice is that the house is on fire. Apparently, it was Gehrman who set the house on fire. This may be very symbolic of the dream finally coming to an end and about to begin again in a vicious cycle. As you approach the doll to level up, the first bit of dialogue she'll give you is Gehrman awaits, as Gehrman is waiting for you in the field of lumen flowers. So this is essentially the end of the game. Now, if you go over to confront Gehrman without having consumed any of the umbilical cords, the first option he'll give you is to consign your life to the dream. If you choose to accept, you'll basically kneel down in front of Gehrman and he'll whip out a scythe. And with that scythe, he'll basically behead you. And once he beheads you, your head will fall to the ground and you will wake up, and everything you have experienced will seemingly have all been a dream. Now, the second option is to refuse, but if you refuse, you will have to fight Gehrman, and Gehrman is a pretty tough fight. Now, as far as what we know about Gehrman, well, Gehrman is a kindly old man who you will first meet upon awakening in the hunter's dream. He is the workshop founder and the very first hunter, though due to his advanced age, he now serves as only an advisor. As such, he has a wealth of experience and knowledge that he will provide throughout your exploration of Yharnam. Gehrman inhabits the hunter's dream and was put there as a guide, a helper to other hunters to advise them. Such is his purpose. Gehrman was associates with Master Lawrence as well as Provost Wilhelm back at the College of Bergenworth. Gehrman's weapon, the burial blades, his attire, and his style of combat were all deeply influential and characterized hunters until the Healing Church and Ludwig took the hunter's style in a new direction. Gehrman was the founder of the Workshop, an institution designed to combat beasts caused by blood usage. His burial blades are a masterpiece crafted at the Workshop. It is forged of siderite, a mineral said to have fallen from the heavens. Gehrman's clothes existed before the Workshop and was created by making adjustments to his everyday clothes. It later became the basis of all hunter garbs. The attire was adjusted to be lightweight, allowing for engagement with beasts at a high rate of speed. During his Bergenworth days, Gehrman entered the Tomb of God. It was in this underground labyrinth that he discovered a great old bell. The bell's ring would resonate across other worlds, and Gehrman would use it as a special signal to call hunters from other worlds to cross the gap and cooperate. The scholars of Bergenworth discovered special blood inside the tombs. The discovery made their dreams of evolution a reality, but its usage led to the metamorphosis into beast. Gehrman trained the first hunters as students and apprentices. Among those students was Lady Maria. Maria had a great admiration for Gehrman, and Gehrman in turn possessed a curious mania towards her. Evidently, Gehrman loved Maria, but whether the feelings were reciprocated or even known about is unclear. Gehrman has clearly occupied the hunter's dream for a long time. He is an old man obscure in the waking world. His dialogue while he's sleeping reveals that he desperately wishes to escape the hunter's dream, and in fact, Gehrman regards it as a nightmare. He suffers from restlessness as he sleeps, but he will sleep calmly through the night if the player kills the Orphan of Kos and its shadowy presence. Should the player defeat Mirgo's wet nurse and silence the nightmare newborn's harrowing cry, Gehrman will offer mercy to the player. To him, mercy means escaping the hunter's dream, and to do so, he will have to kill you with his burial blades if the player consents. If the player decides to reject his offer, Gehrman takes it upon himself to force death upon you by his hands. Interestingly enough, when Gehrman dies, he uses the exact same death animation as Lady Maria. Now, once you have defeated Gehrman, the moon presence will descend upon you from the pale blood moon. Now, the moon presence will embrace you, and if you did not eat the 3 pieces of the umbilical cord, you will not be able to resist the moon presence. Thus, when the moon presence embraces you, you pass out and you wake up in Gehrman's wheelchair, as now you are seemingly the new host of the hunter's dream and the new advisor for all the hunters that will be coming through there. And the cycle begins again, only with you in the wheelchair. Now, if you did eat the 3 pieces of the umbilical cord before you fought Gehrman and you managed to defeat Gehrman, once the moon presence descends upon you and tries to embrace you, you will be able to resist the moon presence, and thus you will have to fight the moon presence. And as far as what we know about the moon presence is described as an eldritch being composed of human flesh and bone with the exception of its head. It is covered in dozens of tentacles, mainly on its head where they resemble hair and a tail. Its body is mainly a large human spine and ribs. The moon presence doesn't have a face, instead it has holes on its head. It is the Great One which created and rules over the hunter's dream, and by defeating it, it will result in the childhood beginnings ending. The moon presence is a nameless Great One in the world of Bloodborne, a being synonymous with the blood moon, pale blood, and likely the source of the hunter's dream. Its actions are the primary instigator and driving force behind many of the events and situations that have arisen in Yharnam. The moon presence's origins are largely unknown, but its first appearance to humanity was to Lawrence, who summoned it for unknown reasons, evidenced by a note located on the upper floor of the lecture building. The moon presence also has the connection to pale blood. The flavor text on this clue reads, "The nameless moon presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, pale blood." Before being encountered by the hunter, the moon presence had bound Gurman, the first hunter, to the hunter's dream, an outlet seemingly used by the moon presence to further its own desires, mainly involving the killing of other Great Ones. Whether or not this has to deal with halting the scourge of beasts or the slaughter of other Great Ones is unknown. However, a note found on the upper floor of the lecture hall lends legitimacy to the idea that the moon presence is actually seeking to eliminate the other Great Ones. The flavor text on this clue reads, "Hunt the Great Ones. Hunt the Great Ones." Beasthood was understood to be the contagious plague that transformed those afflicted into hideous bloodthirsty beasts. In reality, it would appear that the proximity to the moon, and therefore the moon presence, mixed with the use of old blood, is what triggered the transformation in humans and Pthumerians into beast-like creatures. These beast-like creatures, which humans and Pthumerians became themselves, have many physical and thematical ties to the moon presence actual appearance. The beastly paws and talon-like claws, the quadruped movement, the tails, and the exposed rib cage all resemble the scourge of beasts and silver beasts encountered in the waking world of nightmares. A similar phenomena is seen in citizens of Fishing Hamlet, where the village men, especially the snail women, strongly bear a physical resemblance to Kos, a legitimate Great One in close proximity to that village, whose phantasms and bloods were clearly being used in one form or another in air. Despite their unfathomable nature, all Great Ones seem to be united by one single goal. All Great Ones appear to lose their natural-born children through one means or another, and like all Great Ones, the moon presence appears to be primarily motivated by finding a surrogate to replace its lost offspring. With this knowledge in hand, we can understand some of the events of the history of Bloodborne with more clarity. The Pthumerians were a race of superhumans more akin to Great Ones than humans are. Their queen Yharnam was the bearer of a special baby through the use of special blood. A special baby that was used to draw the attentions of the Great One who seek to make the baby their surrogate. By drawing near, the moon presence triggered the scourge amongst the citizens of Loran, a Pthumerian civilization, because the Great One's blood had been distributed amongst the population. The physical death of Yharnam's baby in Utero may have caused the moon presence to retreat, and thereby may have temporarily brought an end to the scourge. The rediscovery of old blood in the tombs below Yharnam by the scholars of Bergenworth would once again set off a chain of events that would lead to the Blood Moon. The old blood was distributed to the population of Yharnam by the Healing Church, and the slumbering consciousness of Queen Yharnam's baby Mirgo was awakened by the School of Menesis through their ritual. These two circumstances caused the spread of the scourge amongst the population of Yharnam when the blood moon drew close. Pale blood. Whether the moon presence intentionally caused beasthood is unclear. However, long before the events of present-day Yharnam, the moon presence made a contract with Gurman, who became the first hunter in a long line of hunters. The hunter's role was to hunt beasts created by the use of the old blood, and the proximity of the blood moon to absorb their blood and have their will channeled into strength by the moon presence and its automation servant. The fate of the majority of hunters was to succumb to the effects of old blood and the bloodlust it conceived, transforming them into more dangerous, more hideous beasts than any of their prey. As noted earlier, the primary motivation of a Great One is to create a surrogate child for themselves, a legitimate offspring, an heir. Towards this end, it can be construed that the hunter's dream was created in order to artificially conceive an heir for the moon presence. Now, it is true that the fate of most hunters is to succumb to the plague of beasts, but there do appear to be special hunters who appear to be largely immune from the effects of the scourge. These hunters have pale blood flowing through their veins. We are unsure where pale blood comes from, but the moon presence appears to be synonymous with the term, and the doll herself appears to be filled with pale blood. The surrogate. Hunters come to the doll in order to strengthen themselves against beasts, but as we all know from the childhood's beginning ending, the strengthening of the hunter perhaps has the unintended consequence of drawing them closer in essence and even appearance to becoming more like a great one. Hunters are echo fiends, beings who imbibe the echoes in the will of the ancient blood in order to become more like great ones, a fitting surrogate indeed. Within the hunter's dream, there's a sole human occupant, a hunter who is trapped there without recourse. Gurman considers the dream a nightmare, and being there torments him. Should the player defeat Gurman in combat, the moon presence will reveal itself and descend upon you in order to embrace the player, and it almost embraces you in sort of a loving way. Should the player have consumed the umbilical cords of past great ones, they will be able to resist the moon presence influence and be reborn as a great one themselves. If you did not consume the umbilicals prior to the fight, then the player will become a pawn of the moon presence, and in essence, its surrogate, its child, just as Gurman was before them. This is the purpose of the hunter's dream and the moon presence actions here. To find a fitting surrogate for itself, like all great ones. The hunt draws those who are strong. The dream strengthens them further, transforming their weaknesses into strength, so they might become suitable surrogates for the moon presence, who seemingly has orchestrated it all. Now, if the player resists the moon presence, then you are a threat to the established order and you're powerful enough to disrupt everything. So in turn, you must be eliminated. In all cases, the doll appears to simply be a tool without willpower, though autonomous from the fate of the moon presence. She is simply created to nurture the hunter's dream in whatever form you may come in. So, if you did consume all three pieces of the umbilical cord, and you managed to defeat Gurman, and then you went on to defeat the moon presence, you wake up in the hunter's dream as an infant great one. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Bloodborne.